Picture this. You're lying on a hospital bed, gripping the rails so tight your knuckles turn white, about to bring new life into this world. When suddenly the doors swing open and there he is, the one person who told you to get rid of the problem when you shared the most beautiful news of your life. Your ex-husband, the man who chose his career over your child, and now he's the only doctor available to save both your lives. What would you do? What could you do? Sometimes life has a twisted sense of humor, putting us face to face with our deepest wounds exactly when we're at our most vulnerable. But here's what most people don't realize. It's in these impossible moments when everything seems to be falling apart that we discover what we're truly made of. This isn't just another story about love gone wrong or medical drama that'll make you cry. This is about what happens when someone who abandoned you becomes the only person standing between you and losing everything. It's about the weight of choices that define us, the power of redemption that seems impossible, and how sometimes the very person who breaks us might be the only one who can save us. You think you know how this story ends, but trust me, you have no idea what's coming, because sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead to the most unexpected healing, and sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who teach us what we're actually capable of surviving. Picture this. You're in the most vulnerable moment of your life, about to bring a new soul into this world, and suddenly you're face to face with the one person who shattered your dreams. That's exactly what happened to Amelia on what should have been the most beautiful day of her life. The contractions had been building for hours, each wave more intense than the last. Amelia gripped the hospital bed rails, her knuckles white as paper, trying to breathe through the pain that seemed to split her entire being in half. The nurses bustled around her, their voices a distant hum as she focused on one thing: protecting the precious life inside her womb. "We need to get her to the OR now," she heard someone say. The urgency in their voice made her heart skip a beat. Something wasn't right. The baby's heartbeat was irregular, and every medical professional in that room knew time was running out. As they wheeled her down the sterile hospital corridor, fluorescent lights flashing overhead like strobes in a nightmare, Amelia's mind raced. She'd prepared for this moment for months, visualizing how it would go, who would be there, what she'd feel when she finally held her child. Never in her wildest dreams did she imagine it would unfold like this. The surgical suite doors swung open with a whoosh, and that's when her world completely collapsed. Standing there, scrubbed and ready, was the face that had haunted her dreams for 2 years. Gabriel, her ex-husband. The man who'd looked her straight in the eye and told her to take care of the problem when she'd shared the news of their pregnancy. Time seemed to freeze in that sterile room. The beeping monitors, the urgent whispers of medical staff, the sharp smell of antiseptic, everything faded into background noise as their eyes met. His face went pale beneath the surgical mask, and she could see the shock, the disbelief, maybe even fear flickering in those brown eyes she once knew better than her own. What the hell is he doing here? The thought screamed through her mind, but no words came out. The pain of another contraction ripped through her body, forcing her back to the present moment. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about survival. Hers and her baby's. Gabriel stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably just seconds. She could see the internal battle playing out behind his eyes. The professional in him knew what needed to be done, but the man who'd walked away from this very situation 2 years ago was clearly struggling. The head nurse stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Dr. Morrison, we need a decision now. The baby's in distress, and we can't wait for another attending." That's when something shifted in Gabriel's expression. The uncertainty vanished, replaced by the focused determination she remembered from their medical school days. He was still the brilliant surgeon she'd fallen in love with, even if he'd become a stranger in every other way that mattered. "Prep her for emergency cesarean," he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling beneath the surface. "And someone get Dr. Chen on the phone. I want him here as backup." Amelia felt a surge of conflicting emotions wash over her. Relief that someone capable was taking charge, terror at what this meant for her baby, and a deep, burning anger that this man, the one who'd abandoned them both, was now the only thing standing between her child and disaster. As they positioned her on the surgical table, she caught Gabriel's eye one more time. In that brief moment, she saw something she hadn't expected: regret. Not just for being here, not just for the awkwardness of the situation, but something deeper, something that looked almost like the grief she'd carried alone for all these months. But there wasn't time to process what that meant. The anesthesia was taking effect. Her vision was getting fuzzy around the edges, and all she could do was whisper a prayer to whoever might be listening. Please just let my baby be okay. That's all that matters now. As consciousness slipped away, one thought echoed through her mind. After everything they'd been through, after all the pain and betrayal, her ex-husband was now literally holding their child's life in his hands. 2 years earlier, Chicago had felt like the center of the universe to Amelia and Gabriel. They were the golden couple of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, both brilliant residents with promising futures, living in a cozy apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, sharing dreams that seemed as solid as the skyscrapers surrounding them. Those were the days when Gabriel would bring her coffee during her 36-hour shifts, when they'd steal moments between surgeries to plan their future together. They talked about everything: the practice they'd open someday, the house with the white picket fence, maybe even kids when the time was right. Life felt perfect, predictable, safe. But here's the thing about life. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. Amelia still remembered the exact moment everything changed. She was sitting on their bathroom floor at 6 a.m., staring at those 2 pink lines like they held the secrets of the universe. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from this overwhelming surge of love she'd never experienced before. In that instant, she knew with absolute certainty that this was right, even if the timing wasn't perfect. Gabriel found her there 20 minutes later, still clutching the test. His face went through a dozen emotions in the span of seconds: confusion, realization, and then something that made her stomach drop. Panic. "Are you sure?" he'd asked, like somehow wishing hard enough could change the reality staring them both in the face. "I took 3 tests, Gabriel. I'm sure." What happened next would replay in her mind for months afterward. Instead of the joy she'd hoped for, instead of the excitement she'd dreamed about, Gabriel sat down on the edge of their bathtub and put his head in his hands. "We can't do this right now, Amelia. You know we can't." Those words hit her like a physical blow. "What do you mean we can't?" "Look at us," he said, gesturing around their tiny bathroom like it proved his point. "We're drowning in student loans, working insane hours, barely keeping our heads above water. My residency interview at Johns Hopkins is next month. Your fellowship application is due in 3 weeks. This would ruin everything we've worked for." She watched the man she loved reduce their future child to an inconvenience, a roadblock to their carefully planned lives. "Gabriel, people have babies during residency all the time. We'll figure it out." "No, we won't." His voice was cold, clinical, like he was delivering a diagnosis to a patient. "You know what happened to Sarah Martinez when she got pregnant during her surgical residency? She had to switch to family medicine, gave up her dream of becoming a trauma surgeon. Is that what you want?" "Maybe some things are more important than careers," she whispered. But even as she said it, she could see him pulling away from her, from them, from the possibility of everything. The weeks that followed were a slow-motion disaster. Gabriel threw himself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession, staying at the hospital for days at a time. When he was home, he was distant, treating her like a roommate instead of his wife. The silence between them grew heavier each day. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening in October. Amelia had just gotten back from her first prenatal appointment, her heart full of wonder at seeing their baby's tiny heartbeat flickering on the ultrasound screen. She'd printed an extra copy for Gabriel, imagining his face when he saw it. She found him in their kitchen, surrounded by medical journals and fellowship applications. When she placed the ultrasound photo in front of him, he barely glanced at it. "Gabriel, look at this. Really look at it." "This is our baby." He pushed the photo away like it burned his fingers. "Amelia, you need to stop this. We've talked about this. We can't have a baby right now." "Stop what? Stop being excited about our child? Stop pretending this is some romantic fairy tale." His voice cracked with frustration. "You're 12 weeks along. There's still time to take care of this situation." The words hung in the air between them like poison. "Take care of this situation. Not our baby, not our child. This situation. You want me to get an abortion?" It wasn't a question. "I want us to be smart about our future. I want us to wait until we can actually provide for a child, until we're established, Until when, Gabriel? Until you decide we're ready? Until it's convenient for your career timeline? Don't make this about my career. This is about both of us, about what's best for everyone involved." Everyone except our baby, you mean? That's when he said the words that shattered not just her heart, but their entire marriage. It's not a baby yet, Amelia. It's a cluster of cells. Don't let your emotions cloud your medical judgment. She stared at this man she'd shared her bed with, her dreams with, her life with, and realized she didn't know him at all. The Gabriel she'd fallen in love with was compassionate, caring, someone who saw the humanity in every patient. This cold stranger standing in their kitchen was someone else entirely. "Get out," she whispered. "Amelia, don't be dramatic. Get out!" The words tore from her throat with a force that surprised them both. "If that's how you really feel, then get out of this apartment. Get out of my life and stay out." He left that night with a single suitcase, like their 2 years of marriage could be erased that easily. 3 days later, she got the divorce papers. He'd already filed, citing irreconcilable differences. Even in legal documents, he couldn't bring himself to acknowledge what he was really walking away from. Within a week, Amelia had packed up her entire life in Chicago and driven the 8 hours to Cedar Falls, Iowa, where her Aunt Margaret welcomed her with open arms and asked no questions. She'd left behind her residency, her fellowship dreams, her carefully planned future, everything except the most important thing of all. As she settled into the quiet rhythm of small-town life, feeling her baby grow stronger each day, Amelia made herself a promise she would prove Gabriel wrong. She would show him that love was stronger than fear, that some things were worth more than career advancement, and that their child would be loved and protected, even if she had to do it completely alone. But she never imagined that 2 years later, fate would put them face to face again in the place where life and death decisions are made every single day. There's something profound about hitting rock bottom that most people don't talk about. Sometimes it's the only place where you can build something truly solid. Amelia discovered this truth in the most unexpected way, in a small town where everybody knew everybody else's business, carrying a secret that was becoming impossible to hide. Cedar Falls wasn't Chicago. There were no towering skyscrapers reaching toward endless possibilities. No bustling crowds where you could disappear and reinvent yourself overnight. Instead, there were tree-lined streets that whispered stories of generations who'd walked the same paths, local diners where conversations paused when strangers entered, and a pace of life that forced you to actually feel everything you'd been running from. Amelia's Aunt Margaret had taken one look at her hollow eyes and trembling hands when she showed up unannounced, and simply opened her arms. No questions, no judgment, just the kind of unconditional acceptance that comes from women who've weathered their own storms and recognize the signs in others. "You stay as long as you need, honey," Margaret had whispered into her hair as they stood in that familiar kitchen doorway. "This house has seen its share of broken hearts getting put back together." But putting her heart back together felt impossible when she couldn't even find a job. Her medical degree meant nothing in a town with one small clinic and a hospital 30 miles away. Her savings were evaporating faster than morning dew, and every rejection letter felt like another door slamming shut on any hope of independence. The loneliness was the worst part. In Chicago, she'd been surrounded by colleagues, friends, the constant buzz of a life in motion. Here, the silence was deafening. Some nights, she'd lie in the tiny guest room under quilts that smelled like lavender and loss, wondering if Gabriel had been right. Maybe she'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe love wasn't enough to raise a child. That's when the baby started moving. It happened during week 18, while she was sitting in the town's only coffee shop, nursing a decaf and staring at another rejection email on her laptop. A tiny flutter, so subtle she almost missed it, like a butterfly testing its wings inside her belly. She froze, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "Did you just—" she whispered to the tiny life inside her. Another flutter, stronger this time, as if the baby was responding to her voice. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet conversations of small-town life and the gentle hum of the espresso machine, everything shifted. This wasn't just a pregnancy anymore. This was her child, actively communicating with her, letting her know they were in this together. From that day forward, everything changed. She started a pregnancy journal. Not because some book told her to, but because she needed to document every single moment of this miracle. Each kick became a conversation, each hiccup a tiny hello from the person she was going to meet soon. "Good morning, little warrior," she'd write each day. Today we're going to figure out how to build our life together. The local clinic became her sanctuary. Dr. Martinez was nothing like the high-tech specialist she'd known in Chicago. He was probably pushing 70, with gentle hands and the kind of wisdom that comes from delivering half the babies in town. His office was cramped and outdated, but when he listened to her baby's heartbeat with that ancient stethoscope, his face would light up like he was hearing symphony music for the first time. Strong heartbeat, he'd tell her during each visit. This little one's a fighter just like their mama. Those appointments became the highlights of her weeks. Not just because she got to hear proof that her baby was thriving, but because Dr. Martinez treated her pregnancy like the miracle it was, never making her feel like she was doing this alone. The people of Cedar Falls slowly began to warm up to her too. Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store started slipping extra vitamins into her cart with a wink. The librarian, Sarah, would recommend parenting books without being asked. Even old Mr. Peterson, who ran the hardware store, began asking about the little one every time she passed by. It was during one of those grocery store runs that she overheard a conversation that would change everything. Two women were talking in hushed tones about Jamie Roberts, a 17-year-old who'd gotten pregnant and been kicked out of her house. The girl was sleeping in her car, they said, too proud to ask for help but clearly struggling. That night, Amelia lay in bed feeling her baby's gentle movements and thinking about Jamie. Here she was, worried about finding the perfect job and the ideal living situation, while a teenager was literally homeless and facing motherhood with nowhere to turn. She started volunteering at the community center the next week, helping with a program that provided resources for young mothers. It wasn't paid work, but it gave her purpose beyond her own struggles. She watched teenage girls navigate the same fears she faced, and something inside her began to heal. "You know what I think?" she wrote in her journal one evening, watching the sunset paint Cedar Falls in golden light while her baby performed what felt like acrobatics in her womb. "I think we ended up exactly where we needed to be." The baby responded with a particularly strong kick, as if agreeing with her assessment. She laughed out loud, the first genuine laughter she'd felt in months. "You're going to love it here, little one," she continued, both speaking aloud and writing in her journal. "We're going to build something beautiful together, something that's completely ours. And I promise you'll never doubt for a single second that you're wanted, that you're loved, that you're the best thing that ever happened to me." As autumn turned to winter and her belly grew rounder, Amelia began to understand something she'd never grasped in Chicago. Sometimes the life you think you want isn't nearly as precious as the life you're brave enough to choose. She was creating more than just a human being. She was building a foundation of love so strong that nothing, not even the ghost of Gabriel's rejection, could shake it. But foundations, she was about to learn, would be tested in ways she never saw coming. When life pushes you to the absolute edge, that's when you discover what people are truly made of. For Gabriel, standing in that surgical suite with Amelia's life and their child's future literally in his hands, all his carefully constructed walls were about to crumble in the most devastating and beautiful way possible. The monitors were screaming. That steady beep, beep, beep that every medical professional knows by heart had transformed into something urgent, something that made everyone in the room move faster, speak louder, think quicker. The baby's heart rate was dropping dangerously, and every second of hesitation could mean the difference between life and catastrophic loss. Dr. Henderson, the hospital director, burst through the OR doors like a man possessed. His face was flushed, his usually perfect tie askew, and when his eyes landed on Gabriel, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the medical chaos like a blade. "Someone want to explain why we have a clear conflict of interest situation happening in my operating room?" Gabriel didn't look up from Amelia's chart, but his jaw tightened in that way it always did when he was fighting to maintain control. "The patient needs immediate surgical intervention, and I'm the most qualified surgeon available." "Are you insane?" Henderson stepped closer, lowering his voice but not the intensity. "She's your ex-wife, Morrison. This is exactly the kind of situation that ends careers and gets hospitals sued into oblivion." The head nurse, Patricia, who'd been working in that OR longer than most people had been alive, cleared her throat pointedly. "Gentlemen, while you're having this conversation, we're losing precious time. This baby's in severe distress and frankly, I don't care who's holding the scalpel as long as they know what they're doing. That's when something shifted in Gabriel's expression. Everyone in that room could see it. The moment when the terrified ex-husband disappeared and the surgeon emerged. It was like watching a transformation, years of training and instinct taking over from personal chaos. "You're right to be concerned about protocol," Gabriel said to Henderson, his voice steady despite everything. "But you're wrong about one thing. I'm not doing this as her ex-husband. I'm doing this as the only obstetrician in this hospital right now, who has the experience to save both their lives." He turned to face the director fully, and there was something in his eyes that made Henderson take a step back. "You can suspend me afterward, fire me, report me to the medical board, whatever you need to do to protect this hospital. But right now, in this moment, they need me, and I'll be damned if I let protocol kill them when I know I can save them." Henderson stared at him for what felt like an eternity. The monitors continued their urgent warnings, Amelia's unconscious form lying vulnerable between them, and the weight of an impossible decision hanging in the air. "Fine," Henderson said finally, "but Dr. Chen is scrubbing in as backup, and every single move you make is going to be documented and reviewed. If this goes sideways, Morrison, it's your license on the line." Gabriel was already moving toward Amelia, his hands steady despite the emotional tornado raging inside him. "Understood. Patricia, I need you to assist. Let's get this baby delivered safely." As the anesthesia held Amelia in peaceful unconsciousness, Gabriel began the procedure that would define both their futures. Every cut, every movement was precise, deliberate, guided by years of training but also by something deeper, a desperate love he'd spent 2 years trying to deny. The moments stretched like hours. Gabriel worked with the kind of focused intensity that reminded everyone in that room why he'd been fast-tracked for department head. This wasn't just medical expertise. This was artistry under pressure, life-saving skill wrapped in quiet determination. "There's the head," Patricia announced, her voice filled with the kind of wonder that never gets old, no matter how many deliveries she's witnessed. And then, in a moment that seemed to suspend time itself, Gabriel lifted their son into the world. The baby was silent for a heartbeat, that terrifying pause that makes every parent's heart stop, before letting out a cry that filled the entire OR with relief and joy. "He's perfect," Gabriel whispered, his voice breaking slightly as he held the tiny, squirming life he'd helped create and just saved. 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong lungs. As he placed baby Theo on Amelia's chest, she was already beginning to wake up from the anesthesia. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then gradually finding the tiny face near her heart. "Is he?" she started to ask, her voice rough from the breathing tube. "He's perfect," Gabriel repeated, and this time there were tears in his eyes. "Absolutely perfect." Amelia looked down at her son, their son, and something powerful and primal took over. She pulled Theo closer, her voice steady despite everything she'd just been through. "I did it," she said, looking directly at Gabriel with an expression that held years of pain, triumph, and fierce maternal love. "We did it. Together, but I did it. I kept my promise to protect him." In that moment, Gabriel understood the full weight of what he'd walked away from 2 years ago. This wasn't just a baby. This was the love story he'd been too scared to write, the family he'd been too afraid to build, the future he'd sacrificed on the altar of professional ambition. But as he watched Amelia cradle their son, whispering soft words of love and welcome, Gabriel realized that some bridges once burned might still have a path across them. Some wounds run so deep they reshape the entire landscape of who we become. For Gabriel, sitting in that sterile recovery room chair watching Amelia sleep with their son nestled against her chest, the weight of his past decisions felt heavier than everything he'd ever carried in his medical career. It had been 3 days since the emergency surgery, 3 days of careful professional distance mixed with moments of raw vulnerability that neither of them knew how to navigate. Gabriel found excuses to check on them more often than protocol required. Each visit a delicate dance between the doctor he needed to be and the father he was terrified to become. Amelia was stronger than he'd expected. The woman he'd married had been brilliant and determined, but this version of her, this mother who'd fought through labor, exile, and reconstruction, was something else entirely. She carried herself with a quiet power that both intimidated and amazed him. "You don't have to keep checking on us," she said during one of his visits, not looking up from where she was gently tracing Theo's tiny fingers. "We're fine. The nurses are taking excellent care of us." Gabriel lingered in the doorway, torn between professional obligation and something much more personal. "I know, I just wanted to make sure the surgical site is healing properly." She finally looked at him then, and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't expected. Not anger, not resentment, but a kind of weary understanding that cut deeper than any accusation could have. "Gabriel," she said softly, "we both know you're not here just to check my incision." That's when everything he'd been holding back for 2 years came spilling out. He moved to the chair beside her bed, his hands trembling slightly as he struggled to find words for emotions he'd spent his entire adult life avoiding. "When I was 8 years old," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "my mother went into labor with what should have been my little brother. My father was the attending physician. He insisted on delivering his own child because he was convinced he was the most qualified person in the hospital." Amelia shifted slightly, pulling Theo closer as she listened. "Everything went wrong. The cord was wrapped around my brother's neck. My mother started hemorrhaging, and my father, he froze. He was so afraid of making the wrong decision that he made no decision at all. By the time another doctor took over, it was too late. I lost them both in the same night." Gabriel's voice cracked, and he had to pause to collect himself. "My father never practiced medicine again. He spent the rest of his life convinced that his arrogance, his need to be the one in control, had killed the 2 people he loved most." Amelia's expression softened, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. "That's why," Gabriel continued, "when you told me you were pregnant, all I could see was history repeating itself. All I could think about was how love had made my father reckless, how caring too much had destroyed everything. I thought if I could just stay detached, stay focused on career and logic and practical decisions, I could avoid his mistakes. But you were making different ones," Amelia said quietly. "I know that now." Gabriel looked at Theo, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "When I saw him for the first time, when I held him, Amelia, I realized I hadn't been protecting anyone. I'd been running from the possibility of becoming my father, and instead I became something worse. A man who abandoned his family before even giving love a chance to work." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 2 years of separation and pain hanging between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. "I can't undo what I did," Gabriel finally said. "I can't give you back those months of pregnancy I should have shared with you, or erase the fear and loneliness you faced alone. But I want to try to make it right." That's when he told her about the HOPE program, his vision for a comprehensive support system for vulnerable pregnant women and new mothers. It had started as penance, he admitted, a way to channel his guilt into something constructive. But as he'd researched and planned, it had become something more, a chance to ensure that no woman would face what Amelia had faced. No child would grow up wondering if they were wanted. "I want you to head it," he said, pulling out a folder thick with proposals and plans. "Not because of us, not because of what we went through, but because you understand what these women need in a way I never could. You've lived it." Amelia took the folder with trembling hands, scanning the detailed outlines for counseling services, financial support, job training programs, and child care assistance. It was comprehensive, well-funded, and exactly the kind of program she'd dreamed about during those long, lonely nights in Cedar Falls. "This is incredible," she whispered. "Gabriel, this could help so many families. Only if you'll do it," he said. "Only if you think you can work with me to build something that matters." She looked down at Theo, then back at the man who'd once broken her heart, but had just delivered their son safely into the world. "I'll do it," she said finally. "But I'm doing it for him, for all the children who deserve better than the choices we made." Gabriel nodded, understanding that forgiveness would be earned through actions, not words. "That's all I can ask for." As he stood to leave, Amelia called his name. "Gabriel, what you did in that OR, stepping up when it mattered most, even knowing it could cost you everything. Maybe you're not your father after all." For the first time in 2 years, Gabriel allowed himself to hope that redemption might actually be possible. Time has a way of healing wounds we thought were too deep to mend, but sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry the scars with grace. For Amelia and Gabriel, The months following Theo's birth became a masterclass in rebuilding trust one careful step at a time. Gabriel proved himself through actions, not words. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, he'd appear at the Hope Program offices with coffee for the staff and updates on funding approvals. He never stayed long, never pushed for personal conversations with Amelia, but his presence was steady, reliable, the opposite of the man who disappeared when she needed him most. The program itself became their shared language. What started as Gabriel's attempt at redemption grew into something neither of them had expected, a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and a common goal. Amelia's natural empathy combined with Gabriel's medical expertise and administrative connections created something powerful, a safety net that was already changing lives across 3 counties. "You should see the statistics," Dr. Martinez told Amelia during one of Theo's routine checkups. "Teen pregnancy complications are down 30% since the Hope program launched. That's lives saved, families kept intact. You two make quite a team." But it was the small moments that mattered most. Gabriel never missed one of Theo's doctor appointments, not as the attending physician, but sitting quietly in the corner as a father who desperately wanted to be present without overstepping boundaries Amelia had every right to maintain. He learned Theo's schedule without being told. When the baby fussed during program meetings, Gabriel would wordlessly take him for walks around the hospital corridors, returning him calm and content. He bought books about child development, not flashy toys, showing he was thinking about Theo's long-term well-being, not trying to buy affection. The breakthrough came 6 months after Theo's birth, during the state health department's visit to evaluate the Hope program for expanded funding. Amelia had worked for weeks preparing presentations, gathering testimonials, organizing every detail to showcase what they'd built together. The morning of the presentation, Theo spiked a fever. Nothing serious, just a common cold, but enough to make him fussy and clingy. Amelia was torn between her sick baby and the presentation that could secure the program's future for years to come. "I can't leave him," she told Gabriel, pacing her small office with Theo whimpering against her shoulder. "But if I don't give this presentation, you're going to give the presentation," Gabriel said quietly. "And Theo's going to be fine. I can't ask you to babysit. You have surgery scheduled." "I cleared my morning," he interrupted. "Theo needs his mother to be present for this meeting, and the Hope program needs you to fight for it. I've got him covered." That afternoon, Amelia delivered the presentation of her life. She spoke about teenage mothers finding hope, about families staying together, about the ripple effects of supporting women during their most vulnerable moments. When the state officials announced full funding approval for the next 3 years, the entire room erupted in applause. But when she returned to her office, the sight that greeted her was worth more than any funding approval. Gabriel was asleep in her desk chair, Theo curled contentedly on his chest, both of them breathing in perfect synchronization. She stood in the doorway watching them, her son's tiny hand resting over his father's heart. Gabriel's usually serious face relaxed in sleep, the afternoon sunlight painting them both in warm gold. For the first time in over 2 years, she allowed herself to imagine what family might look like. The recognition came gradually. First, a feature in the local newspaper about the Hope program's success, then a state award for innovative healthcare programming. Finally, an invitation to present their model at the National Conference on Maternal Health, an honor that would put both their names on the national stage. "You should go alone," Gabriel told her when the invitation arrived. "This is your achievement. You built something incredible and you deserve all the recognition." "We built it together," Amelia corrected, surprising herself with the admission. "The funding, the medical protocols, the hospital partnerships, none of that would have happened without you." The conference was a triumph. Healthcare professionals from across the country wanted to replicate their model, and several major medical journals requested articles about their integrated approach. But the real victory was simpler. Watching Gabriel beam with pride as Amelia received a standing ovation, knowing that he was genuinely happy for her success without needing credit for himself. On the plane ride home, with Theo babbling happily in his carrier between them, Amelia finally said what had been building in her heart for months. "I'm not ready to forget what happened," she said quietly. "I may never be ready to completely forget, but I can see who you're becoming, and I think I think maybe we could try to build something new." Gabriel turned to look at her, hope and caution warring in his expression. "What would that look like?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Something careful, something honest, something that puts Theo first and acknowledges that we're different people than we were before." Gabriel reached over and gently touched Theo's hand, and their son immediately grasped his finger with that instinctive grip that seems to say, "Don't let go." "I'd like that," Gabriel said simply. "I'd like to try." As their plane descended toward home, Amelia realized that redemption wasn't a destination. It was a daily choice to show up, to do better, to build trust through consistent actions over time. The scars from their past would always be part of their story, but maybe those scars could become the foundation for something stronger than what they'd lost. Maybe, just maybe, the little boy sleeping between them could become the bridge that led them back to each other, not as the people they used to be, but as the family they were brave enough to become. And that's how Amelia discovered something most people never learn, that the deepest healing often comes through the very wounds we thought would destroy us. Gabriel didn't just save their baby that night. He began the long journey of saving himself from the fear that had controlled his entire life. But here's the thing that'll keep you thinking long after this story ends. Redemption isn't a single moment of heroic action. It's showing up day after day, proving through your choices that you've become someone worthy of the second chance you're asking for. Think about your own life right now. Who have you written off as irredeemable? What bridges have you burned that maybe, just maybe, could still be crossed if someone was brave enough to take the first step? And more importantly, are you living as the person you want to be, or are you letting fear make your most important decisions? Because here's what Amelia and Gabriel learned the hard way. Sometimes the people who hurt us most aren't evil. They're just scared. Scared of failing, scared of not being enough, scared of loving so deeply that losing everything becomes possible. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing love anyway, choosing to show up anyway, choosing to rebuild anyway. The Hope program they built together has now helped over 3,000 families across 12 states. But the real miracle wasn't the program. It was two broken people deciding that their scars could become the foundation for something beautiful instead of something bitter. So what about you? What would happen if you stopped running from your fears and started running toward the life you actually want? What if the very thing that scares you most is exactly what you need to face to become who you're meant to be? If stories like this one inspire you to think differently about forgiveness, second chances, and the power of choosing love over fear, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Because every week we share stories of real people who found extraordinary strength in ordinary moments. Stories that might just change how you see your own life's possibilities.